Most donors are already using different forms of online transaction for everything, from bill paying to receiving direct deposits for their paychecks. Even before this crisis, an increasing number were giving online to other causes they cared about. So it's really imperative that churches engage parishioners in new ways, providing a way for them to give electronically, especially through recurring giving options. This way, your ministries have the opportunity to grow and meet the needs of your community, meeting our parishioners where they are, especially with their giving. As we've seen, this crisis has truly enhanced our use of digital giving. In April alone, e-commerce retailers had more traffic to their sites each and every day of the month than they do on the day after Thanksgiving, which is the busiest shopping day of the year. You can't tell me that people haven't figured out digital. And even though we know that this crisis is driving us to digital, we know, looking at the trends over the last couple of years, that people in our churches were already moving to online monthly giving. This is a sure and steady growth that's been happening for many years. Even if this crisis hadn't happened, our congregations would need to respond. And now that we have a critical need to be able to accept offerings and gifts while we are no longer able to worship together in person, we should take this opportunity to prepare, to use this time to help ourselves in our present, knowing that it will continue to help us into our future. Excuse me. So I started using e-checks and the web bill pay option offered by my bank almost 10 years ago. It is in fact so long ago now, I can't remember the last check I wrote, last bank church I wrote a check to, excuse me. I only had to reorder checks last year when we moved. And I have really enjoyed the fact that all of the churches that I have been to in the last 20 years are in my bank account, and I can give to them when I want to, when my heart is generous, when I have money in my bank account, and I can do it at the tap of my fingers. Julie and I have had conversations about this too. I know that she does her giving through web bill pay as well. And for me, I find this something that I enjoy. I enjoy that this is a way that I can be generous. Many of the platforms that we will talk about too have options where you can receive funds for events or specific items. If you were collecting money for youth trips, for camp, for picnics, retreats, this will give you another option that is very attractive to many people. As we have talked about in other events and other conversations, average Sunday attendance for most Episcopalians hovers somewhere around 1.2 times a month. If you are able to make it easier for folks to provide their offering and gifts to your congregation in a regular manner, you will make it easier for them to be good stewards, and you will make it easier on your church's budget. I have been part of several churches since I've started doing this kind of work, and I'm always amazed at the way we tend to exclude folks from the offering time when we pass the plate. We'll pass it while the choir is singing, and they might get to fling their offering envelope in the plate afterwards as it passes by. Our clergy aren't usually able to participate. And when I took my turn working in the nursery, no one came to gather my offering either. So you might be able to see how we could be more inclusive of the people who worship with us by offering digital giving. And all of this is before we even begin to include folks who will be watching our services through Facebook Live and YouTube into the future when we return to worshiping together in our buildings.
Thank you. And I have been so glad to read in the comments that several of you are currently looking into how to encourage folks who are attending who are not currently parishioners at your church to be able to give during your broadcast on Facebook or YouTube. And some of our information that we'll have today will help you as you consider that. So now that the barriers of entry are breaking down, and it is so much easier for our organizations to set up digital giving and for individuals to take part, this is the time to make sure that you have these giving options at your church. The Burke Donor Survey is an annual research project studying Americans' philanthropy and specifically how fundraising practices and beliefs affect the financial well-being of not-for-profit organizations. Beginning with a 2016 survey, they noted that the percentage of donors who chose to give electronically no longer varies significantly across generations. And this is absolutely true and what we're seeing across our churches. And with this, it is important to note that as we communicate across generations, it is essential to communicate in the patois of each generation. So for instance, as Stephanie was talking about before, I do give electronically to my church, but occasionally I do pull out a check to do something. And one of my girlfriends a few years ago when I pulled out the check said, how vintage, because she Venmos. She doesn't use checks. So that's one example there. And another example is if you're writing in your newsletters, for instance, the electronic giving is, for instance, even easier than writing a check, that will resonate with those who write checks. It's not going to resonate with the 20-somethings who don't know how to write a check, who need your help. Perhaps some of you have been through this when someone younger is trying to write a check. Where do you put the date? Exactly what are you supposed to put in the pay to order? So if you're talking about as you move into digital, this is just as easy as writing a check. Make sure you know who your audience is and be mindful of the context in which you're describing the possibilities of digital giving. I'm also going to add here to consider the gender of your generations here too. As Stephanie indicated earlier, 68% of the respondents in the survey regarding giving during the COVID pandemic were women, which is likely an indication of who is giving. The Episcopal Church, among all mainline denominations, just like other mainline denominations, trends older than other denominations. Just like other denominations, it also trends female because life expectancy for women is longer. Thus, the majority of decisions and the decision makers and the givers in the Episcopal Church are older women. So if you're interested in the majority of your givers giving electronically, be mindful of your real audience. Be mindful that most of them are older women. And I would suggest here for one of their own, an older woman, to be one of the ones enthusiastically embracing digital giving and evangelizing digital giving to your congregation. Stephanie and I are in conversations quite often with church treasurers and finance folks. These folks tend to be men. So, you know, think about how we might balance this in the future as well. But for now, if your church trends male in the treasury and finance ministries, consider how you might broaden the demographic of those who are actually talking, writing, and evangelizing about digital giving and how to do it.